Hello there, guys, and welcome back to my channel, to another episode of the Chelsea transfer talk, which was supposed to be secondary today, and we were mostly supposed to focus on Real Madrid 2, Chelsea 1, which obviously took place late last night in Charlotte, the last game of Chelsea's US preseason tour. But literally minutes before we went live here, the Fabrizio Romano released a here we go, I suppose, about Samu Omorodion joining Chelsea from Atletico Madrid. We'll look at the tweet. We'll look at what the fees are. We'll look at, is this a good move? Is this a bad move? Plenty of things to discuss. Of course, Conor Gallagher going the other way. That here we go. We got, what was it, yesterday, 2 days ago, whatever it was. We'll discuss that as well. And then, of course, we will still get into the Real Madrid versus Chelsea game in detail. Let me bring it up first and foremost, and then I bring my two wonderful guests in to the discussion. Like I say, Samu Omorodion to Chelsea. Here we go. Deal in place for £35 million as fixed fee from Atletico Madrid. 7-year contract for Omorodion at Chelsea. Already agreed as he's set for medical tests. Bayer Leverkusen and more clubs tried to enter race, but Omorodion joins Chelsea. Pice, I'll start with you first of all. Thank you for coming on, as always, my friend. Yeah, obviously we will talk about the Real Madrid game from last night in a bit, but we start with Omorodion. Judging from a few of your tweets that I've seen, from a few of the things you've said in our group chat that I've seen, you're not particularly over the moon. I don't think any of us is particularly over the moon. The question is, how unhappy are we? Or are we just like, let's just wait and see? Where do you stand on it? Obviously, for people that don't know, he's officially, he's a Spanish international, plays currently for the Spain under-21s. He also represented Spain at the Olympics and scored a goal, actually. And he's 20 years old, 6'4" already in meters. That's like 190, what was it? 193, supposedly, according to Transfer Market. So big guy, very raw still. Spent a season on loan at Deportivo last year, is now back at Atletico Madrid. Yeah. Pice, where do you stand on it, bro?
Yeah, I'm not really too sure, to be honest. I guess it's like most of our other signings this summer. It's just, more potential, more, try and find the hidden gem type thing and hope they bang. This one seems like Chelsea trying to find the next Drogba up front, with Jackson. Now it's Samu, and it's like, I don't know what we're doing really, but we'll give him a chance. He offers something different. Like you said, he's 6'4". He's a big old lump. I've watched him a couple of times in the Olympics. For me though, it's a bit of a weird one because like he's more of a transitional striker from what I've watched. Like he's very good on counter attacks because he's very fast. And he's he's kind of a freak athlete for his height and his size. He's very, very fast.
He's basically Lukaku, isn't he?
he kind of does remind me of Lukaku, yeah.
Lukaku when we first got him from, what was it, Genk or Ghent? One of the two. No, Anderlecht. Sorry, Anderlecht.
Anderlecht, yeah.
Obviously not the same level, but I think Connor Holden's been comparing him to Haaland in terms of the play style. Like, he's that kind of box presence. He's a big old lump, you kind of you look for the ball for him. Maybe he offers something different off the bench. I don't know, but there's still links that we're trying to get Osimhen on loan. So it could be a case of no Osimhen and Samu and Jackson, and then Nkunku goes on loan. I just guess it's a lot of unknowns right now, and to be fair, like we've kind of swapped Gallagher for Samu in a sense because. Earlier on in the window, I think we actually had a 42 million pound bid rejected for Samu. But obviously, because we lowered the fee for Gallagher, they've obviously lowered the fee for Samu and used that to get Alvarez or help get Alvarez at least. So I don't know. I don't feel like the signing's needed, but I hope he proves us all wrong. I hope he's good. I hope that he can be sort of a fan favorite in a sense of like, okay, right, like. How no one really expected anything from Jackson, and he kind of like became a fan favorite, I guess. And I feel like speaking to some people, they're convinced that if he's he's very raw, but especially off the bench in the first season, and a lot of Chelsea fans, a couple of guys I speak to, convinced will really like him because he'll just like you can chuck him on, he'll chase everything. He's a huge lad. He kind of gets you excited because of he tries to toss defenders around. He's quite sort of. He's just a bit of a unit, a bit of a beast. So it's something different profile-wise to what we've got, I guess. But yeah, I still want to get Osimhen if we can. But it seems a lot of money for someone very raw. But then again, there's been occasions where we've done that, and then we look back on it and we go, actually, it was actually a decent deal looking back. So long story short, I don't know.
Can you give me many examples of that?
Well, I'd say
do you have many examples of thinking of where we thought that in the past, and that came like Jackson and Palmer. Otherwise, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, but Palmer was 21 when he came in, was not so raw as this guy,
Yeah, but
for
that's because
example.
he's from the City Academy. I don't think
I think
anyone
to
out
be
of the City
fair, like
Academy
not.
is raw.
I think not Badiashile currently, but when he signed for like 30 million, people would obviously because we wanted Gavardio at the time, and everyone was like, "Why are we spending 30 million on Badiashile?" And he did decent, but obviously he's dropped off a lot recently. So yeah, there's been a few, but there's also been a lot where we've signed them. We're like, okay, like we really didn't need that player. So I'm interested to see how he does. I guess the one big positive is there's no way this guy isn't suited to the Premier League, like physical wise. Like he's he's gonna give a lot of tests for defenders. I think for sure because he's a big lad. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? Dimitar, I'll get you on it in a second. A couple of people in terms of these kind of signings where we kind of were a bit underwhelmed and then didn't know what or were surprised after. I don't think Gusto applies as such because at least me personally, from what I had heard and seen of Gusto before he joined us, I was expecting a good player. While with some other players, you sign them and you're like, I'm not sure if you are a good player. And that's kind of what applies to Omorodion here. For me, at least, like I say, sure, I've seen a few clips, but I almost, when we make signings, I almost purposely try to not watch compilations because I feel like compilations just skew opinions because compilations can be in all directions, can be just skewed. Like they can make a player look too good, but some the compilations can also make a player look worse than they are. So that's why I try to stay away from compilations, even if I understand people are like, well, how do you know anything about it? I'm like, I'd rather sit here and wait and actually see them play for us. But I'm a bit caught in two minds because part of me, and I've said this on streams in the past a few weeks ago, I actually support the fact or the idea that Jackson remains the number one striker and we kind of brought a backup to him to be kind of like I say, the second choice striker, I guess, right? Now, you could argue that already Mark Yu was that, but Mark Yu looks like a good player, but I'm not sure if he's that much of a goal scorer. At least from what I've seen in preseason so far, he looks like a good player, but I'm not sure if he's a goal scorer as much. I say that on his debut for Barcelona, he scored with his first touch. So that would make you think he most certainly is a goal scorer. So, it's one of those. But yeah, there is that to me where I'm like, I think Jackson did enough last season to deserve another season as the first choice striker. I also think that if you're going down this route of squad planning and squad building that Chelsea have gone down on in terms of signing young players and hoping they develop into great players, and then you get players for a little bit cheaper, and then they turn into fantastic players that at that moment would then cost 100 million or whatever, but you sign them for 30 or 40 or whatever. But then the problem with that idea is if after 1 year, say with Nicholas Jackson, we signed him last summer, if after 1 year you put an Osimhen in front of him, then what was the whole point in signing him in the first place? Because then he wasn't really a signing that you're like, okay, we're signing a young player who we hope turns into a superstar, because a year later you just bought a superstar instead. So you could have just not signed a young superstar, instead bought a Giroud type experienced striker, which would have put the squad in a much better situation. But because that's not the route we go down on, we go for these young players, and as much as I'm not always a fan of it, that's how we've gone down on. So now I think we need to find the best within that idea of how to build a squad. And then I think it's just stupid and pointless if you put someone ahead of Jackson now. So I actually kind of sympathize and agree with getting a backup for Jackson. The only thing I'll say is to get a backup for Jackson who's a big guy and whatever else, like a big, slightly different profile of striker than Jackson is, you could have got that for cheaper and better than Omorodion is. So that's kind of the problem. Like West Ham signed Niklas Füllkrug for how much? What, roughly the same money? Like, I know he's old, but arguably he would have been the fucking perfect striker in that sense. Like a bit like Giroud, old, holds the ball up, big guy, scores a header. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying we should have signed Füllkrug, but I would have preferred Füllkrug to Omorodion. So it's, like I say, I'm stuck between two minds because I'm like, I appreciate that they don't put a number one striker ahead of Jackson, which, like Pies touched on, there is still a small chance that Osimhen could happen. We'll speak about that. But yeah, it's still a little bit underwhelming. We'll get his transfer market profile up in a minute. But Dimitar, before anything else, where do you stand on it? Especially like Pies said, we essentially swapped Gallagher for him. Now someone in the chat said, no, we just swapped Gallagher for Dewsbury Hall. Sure, in position, but with club and transfer fee, it's essentially a swap between Gallagher and Omorodion because the fee is nearly the same. And obviously, one's going to Atletico, the other one's going from Atletico to Chelsea. So, where do you stand on it? I assume you've not seen much of him like me, but as a
Absolutely
principle?
nothing. I barely learned his name in the last 3 days to properly. So yeah, but yeah, I think it's clear this is as close as we can get to a direct player swap in the modern age. The two teams just exchange players for roughly the same fee for financial reasons and for other reasons. Yeah. So I have no idea who he is. Like you said, a lot of people say that he has these certain qualities. He's a physical player. He can bounce defenders. He can make an impact off the bench, which is something I think we needed. This specific profile of player is something we certainly needed.
Yeah.
The question is, should that profile of player come in the package of a 19, 20-year-old in order to change games and to be impactful? This is the question that concerns me a little bit, because if he starts going in, like if he starts coming in certain games as a substitute to change the games, and if he's not changing the games, then he will not warrant starting over GU if he stays and not goes on loan, or over Jackson even in games of lesser importance. But then if he starts to come off the bench and score goals, then do you give him a starting position or is he a bench option? I think these are problems which we can have, but as Pai said, right now we have no clue. He may be phenomenal, he may be very bad. There is absolutely no way to tell, because we also have not a very good idea how we're going to play this season. I'm a bit vexed from all of the games I saw. I saw the highlights of the first 2 games, and I watched the 2 recent games against City and Real Madrid. And I'm not fairly convinced I understand what exactly we want to do. And I'm not fairly convinced most of the players know exactly what we want to do. But this is another
It
topic.
depends on what you mean by what we want to do. I think how we try to attack is actually surprisingly clicked quickly, in my opinion, because chance creation has, in my opinion, been surprisingly phenomenal, really, in the last, especially against teams as good as Real Madrid and Man City are. We had like 6 or 7 good big chances against both of them, which to me, that I didn't see that coming, I'll be honest. Now, we'll talk about our defensive issues after that, but that's kind of where the problem comes from. It's like we all thought it'd be the opposite from last year. We're like, we'll concede less, but we'll also score way less. Turns out it might be the exact same. That long as we start
that is a
scoring
possibility.
chances, it might just be a copy of last season with a completely different style of play. So what was the whole point? But it's an interesting one. A lot of people in the chat, Amit said a minute ago, didn't Omorodion get basically the same stats as Højlund when United signed him? It's a very, very decent signing. I mean, I didn't compare their stats, but
comparison to Højlund is not a sign for positivity. No way, fam. No way.
Yeah, I mean, like Højlund isn't even half as good as Jackson. What do you mean? Like, what is that now supposed to make me excited?
I think he probably means price-wise, though. I think he probably means like price-wise, because United spent 70 million on Højlund, and that's
well,
but then I also compare it price-wise to Gallagher, who was Chelsea captain for most of last season, played every game, had 19 goal contributions as a central midfielder.
1 year left, though.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, sure, you can compare the price to Højlund and it looks not bad. You can compare the price to what we got for Gallagher and it looks pretty bad. So,
or if you can compare it to Jackson, I mean, what are the chances he actually outscores Jackson this year? I mean, if he outscores the first season of Jackson this year, I think very slim, even if he has a successful season.
That's an unfair comparison, though, because he won't get to start as much as Jackson did last year.
That is true, but I still think even if he gets near the same goals per minute ratio, that would be a very big success, in my opinion, if he gets to the same goals per minute ratio. Yeah.
Fair enough. I mean, he says similar stats, half the price, worth the punt. Is it worth the punt? I mean, maybe. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one, really. I mean, let me bring up his transfer market profile just quickly. It doesn't read particularly impressively, but sure, he's young still. He just turned 20 in May, obviously. I mean,
he's 20. What kind of stats can he have? Like,
exactly. I mean, at the Olympics, 4 games, 1 goal. All right, I suppose. Obviously, citizenship, Spain and Nigeria. He's born in Melilla. Not that I know where Melilla is in Spain, but in Spain. So I'll take that, I guess. And you can see his transfer history. He started at Nervion, whoever the flip that is. Granada for a little while. I assume that's the backup, the second team of Granada, I guess. Then went to Atletico Madrid for 6 million euros back on August 21st, 2023. So pretty much a year ago. So
can I chip in? Can I chip in on that? So he scored. I think he scored against Atletico Madrid, and Atletico Madrid signed him off the back of that game.
Okay.
Just a little background. Like
But
they were
for
that.
Granada, that was still.
I think so. They were that impressed
Must be.
from his before, and they signed him. I think off the back of that performance against them. From what I was reading, just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is interesting. But on Atletico's side, fair play. Do you know what I mean? Because they, in a space of 1 year, turned a €6 million player into a 40 million euro player, 35 million pound euro player. I'll ask you this question. How many players have Chelsea signed that have increased in value this quickly and this much? Not many. And the ones that do that, we don't want to sell, like a Palmer, right? Obviously, his value increased by about that much, but we wouldn't want to let him go. So it's like...
The thing is, we usually buy the players which do this sort of value increase. We don't make them.
First of all, that. And second of all, without Chelsea... who buys these players off you for this increased value? Do you know what I mean? We are the club that
That's
buys
a good question.
higher value players. We're not the team, because who buys players from us? As we can tell, fucking nobody. That's the whole problem. Do you know what I mean? I mean, to be honest, I'm still surprised that Atletico went for Gallagher in this sense, alongside spending £85 million on Julian Alvarez. Still find that pretty unbelievable. Now, is that completely outrageous price for how good Alvarez was and how many goal contributions he's got, in particular as essentially a backup player, even though I know he played a lot last season with De Bruyne's injury, but he still didn't play up front all the time and his goal contributions were still mental. So yeah, crazy where that's going to come from, really. But I guess, you know, it feels a little bit like, now in hindsight it worked out all right, so maybe in hindsight this one will work out all right as well. But it feels a little bit like all those years ago, that little triangle of transfers that we did with Dortmund, Arsenal, and ourselves, where we got Giroud, we gave Batshuayi to Dortmund, and Arsenal got who? Was it Aubameyang? Who they signed?
Aubameyang, yeah. Aubameyang.
Yeah, there you go.
By the way,
so yeah,
I'm still pissed we just didn't exchange Batshuayi for Aubameyang that winter, but that's another story.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I was much happier with Giroud than I probably would have ever been with Aubameyang. But who knows? I mean, obviously, for Arsenal, Aubameyang was great, to be fair. But yeah, I don't know about this. But yeah, you can see it down here. His goal stats so far. Last season, he had 35 games, 9 goals, 1 assist in 2,000 minutes. The year before that, I'm pretty sure that's the second division. I'm not 1,000% sure, though. 14 goals in 29 games. I don't know. It's just one of those where it's like, it might work out, and if the scouts have had an absolute blinder, it might be amazing. But as of what we can tell so far, I don't think any of, like, if you're a Chelsea fan and you sat here buzzing that we signed Omorodion, if you're sat here trying to point score over rival fans or even over other Chelsea fans saying, no, but it's a great signing, even like Amit did earlier, it's like, look how great value it is. It's a very, very decent signing. You don't know that. Like, you just, sure, if you compare it to Højlund, but we just don't know right now whether this will be a good signing or not. So only time will tell, I suppose. But yeah, anybody got anything else to say on this? Yeah, I just don't know, because you both said it already. It's such an unknown, and he looks so raw, and so much of similarities to a young Lukaku, where it's like you have all the physical, like, all the basics of physical traits that you need to be a super footballer in the Premier League in particular. But then when he looks like his first touch sometimes looks like he's wearing Timberlands, like Lukaku, no player with a bad touch is good in the Premier League. That doesn't, like, the Premier League is so high intensity, so fast paced. If you don't have a good touch, you're never going to be anything. Like, it's just as simple as that. In my opinion, a good touch is the most basic, most important thing to have as a Premier League player to be successful. But obviously, I'm not saying his touch can't improve, but I'm saying if it doesn't, compared to what we've seen already, I'm really not sure how this is going to pan out. I'm really not sure. Like Cyril says, smash the like button, ladies and gentlemen, and subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Because we just spoke about this kind of triangle of transfers, I guess let's talk about Conor Gallagher on this very note as well. Just, excuse me, please. I just need to go find where I flip and put that tweet, because there's about 300 of those that I've got. Where is it? Hello? Why am I going to not find it? I literally had it up. There we go. Thank you. So let me bring this one up. Fabrizio, yes. So we got this. When was this? On the 6th of August. So yesterday afternoon, pretty much 24 hours ago. Atletico Madrid, Conor Gallagher to Atletico Madrid. Here we go. After late night exclusive news on his green light to Atletico, there's okay for his move from club's 5-year contract for Gallagher, 42 million euros as fee to Chelsea for the English midfielder. Medical booked on Wednesday. For Wednesday, Matt Law tweeted earlier that Conor Gallagher is now on his way to Madrid. Pice, I'll start with you once again. Obviously, you were one of these people that earlier than others were like, let's sell him. I mean, to be fair, until before last season, most of us, a lot of us would be like, yeah, it just makes sense to sell him. Now we sold him, even though he had an outstanding season, we sold him for less than we got offered 18 months ago. So that's a bit questionable. But obviously, we also, we sold him to not a Premier League rival. So I guess that is something because, you know, whether you like Mount, whether you hate Mount, whether you think Mount did wrong, whether you don't think Mount did wrong, part of the annoyance about that whole transfer is that he went to one of our rivals in Manchester United. Gallagher didn't do that. Gallagher went to Atletico. He can have a good time there, you know, maybe even stop Barcelona from winning things, keep the blue flag flying over there. Much less of an annoyance, right? But does it feel... Go on, Pice.
No, I thought you was going to... I thought you'd...
No, it's all good. Go on.
No, it is much less of an annoyance. You know, you're looking at this thing, you probably think that's somewhat realistic for someone with 1 year left, but you know, English tax, etc. We probably would have sold him for more if we could get someone in the Premier League. And there was even rumours that obviously we'd agreed a £57 million deal with Villa, obviously, but he didn't want to go there. But that would include someone going the other way.
By the way, do you believe that, or do you think could that be one of the club briefs to make Gallagher the villain again?
No, I feel like that's probably true. Maybe with Duran the other way, but I don't know. There was quite a few people reporting that. And anyway, that would have been like a PSR deal. So with, you know, the fee seems high, but then obviously we'd have to pay some money for someone else. Kind of like what we've done here with Samu. That's why I was saying it's linked. We've only dropped the price because they've dropped the price on Samu. So, you know, at the start of the window, I was covering a lot of the Samu news when we was first linked, and they were asking for like 70, 80 million euros, you know, because they didn't want to let him go. Like they said, you know, he's the next future striker for Atletico Madrid and everything like that. So they didn't want to let him go.
And now they signed 2 strikers this summer instead.
Yeah, well, they sold. What was it? Was it Morata or Depay? I don't know which one.
I think both of them. They let go Depay on a free, and I think they sold Morata to Milan.
Yeah, Morata certainly left for AC Milan. I didn't even know Depay left them as well.
But, Depay left even before the Euros. He was basically a free agent playing for Netherlands.
Oh, really? I didn't even realize. There you go. Because he hadn't been there for very long, had he? So, like, did they tell him
1 or 2 seasons max?
Sign a short contract? I don't know. But yeah, it's a tricky one because watching the game yesterday, watching the game against Man City, what I felt we missed was Gallagher's press. So I don't know where it's coming from, but you know, he's gone now. On the part of me is happy that the saga's over because it just didn't feel like a healthy and positive thing for the club at all. Like, I don't like how it's going, but the fan base is getting so divided. Like even me and Lewis go so far back, but some of the things he said about Gallagher, I want to strangle the man. Do you know what I mean? I love it. I want to strangle him.
No, but Lewis just got like this, like, you know, like he just, with the academy players, he plays around with it.
He's just a troll. Yeah, he just loves to troll. I get it as well. Like, and sometimes we speak like offline, I guess, and then it's a bit more serious. But
just trolls. Yeah.
It just feels a bit, I don't know. My tweet about him was as well, I feel really bad for Gallagher that I'm like, imagine you join a club at 8. You go through every youth age, every age group. Then you go to, 2 loans? Do fantastically well at each and every single one of them. Do better at West Brom than Dewsbury Hall does for Leicester. Go to Palace, do even better. Come to Chelsea and fight your way from a fringe player to one of the most important players in the team to wearing the armband every week because the main captain can't stay fit and the other captain, also can't stay fit and also is terrible. So that a fan of that club where that happened doesn't appreciate that. I don't understand how you can be a fan of this club if you don't appreciate that. Like what's bigger than joining a club at 8 and making it to the first team and being one of the most important players? There's nothing bigger and better in football for me than that. So
I mean,
I
if
just
this
find it
was
sad that fans don't appreciate this. Go on, Dimitar.
if this was a Hollywood movie, people would say it's way too unrealistic.
Yeah.
How everything happens, but for him, everything literally happens like that. And even if people don't like him or like him, he was useful last season, and he had tangible effectiveness. So
And
people
what he did
cannot
for us
deny that.
last season, he did on 50k a week, by the way. Compare it to Sterling's 325k. Do you know what I mean? I'm just saying. Like, people talk about, pay rise and, why, how can he refuse this contract? Which is, I'm not even going to get into that because it's going to rile me up again. But he was on 50k when he did all of this last season. So, yeah, I find it sad that he's going, but at the same time, well, it happened now. So what can I do? I hope Dewsbury Hall does good. I don't think Dewsbury Hall will do as good as Conor Gallagher, but hey, I could be proven wrong. I hope I'm proven wrong in a way. But yeah, Pice, anything else you want to add on this? Like, where do you stand on like I say, you were one of the early ones that were like, sell Gallagher, get rid of him, whatever. But at the same time, I think also part of you got slightly won over by him last year. And also because we sold so many other youngsters, even you didn't feel 1,000% like happy at least that he's going. Even if maybe with the division in the fan base, it was the best thing and the only solution to the scenario anyway. But yeah, where do you stand on it? What are your thoughts, bro?
First, I think it's a really good move for him. I think it's a really good move. Obviously, there was, debates whether he was going to go there or not. Didn't want to leave London, I don't think, from everything I'd heard, but he was eventually convinced, I think. And I mean, it's a great move for him. I think the system suits him perfectly. As you say, ironically, I actually agree with what we've seen off the ball under Maresca. I think he could have been a very useful tool as one of those like advanced eights, tracking back. But I think we got a decent fee for him. I would have preferred if we didn't sign Samu, because then I'm like, okay, right, we got 40 million or 37 million in the bank. Let's put that towards someone big. But as I said, it almost seems like we've swapped him in a way. Okay, you get.
And if
that.
Omorodion doesn't work out well now, that just makes the whole thing even worse.
Yeah, and it's just like I've always said Gallagher's a useful player, but I've never been like shy from saying I'd also accept bids because I would prioritize other players ahead of him. But at the end of the day, he's definitely a useful player. It's it's obviously sad that he's gone. It's another Cobham player leaving. But as you said, at least he didn't go to Spurs in the end. That would have just been dreadful because
even Villa
just
would have been great.
Spurs, it's like
exactly. Like Villa would have been better than Spurs, but I'm still very happy that I don't have to watch him in the Prem all the time. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I guess I could have been happy when he scores for Villa against United, Arsenal, Liverpool, City, whatever. So I guess that could have been that positive. But if they finish ahead of us, then that would certainly not have been a positive, would it? But yeah, Tim, is there anything else you want to add on the Gallagher stuff before we move on to speaking about them?
Yeah, I mostly agree with what Pice and what you said. I think he could have been a very useful squad player. And my main issue is I like him, of course, but even if I ignore that, it's a type of player that we don't have. And it's a type of player who effectively does what his type of player does. So I'm a fan of giving a coach options, because even if we say Maresca has this specific style of play with specific players needed, giving him options down the road will only mean that if he needs to change something ad hoc, he can do it. And limiting him by selling different types of players I'm not a fan of that. Even if Gallagher would have not been a permanent starter, he could have been useful. But as you said, I'm happy for him. I'm happy he's not in the Prem. And yeah, let's see if some of the signings that we've made already this summer can justify replacing him and others who are leaving.
No, exactly. And I mean, there's also like, as much as I'm, very much want to side with the Cobham players in these kind of scenarios, in these situations, I'm sure Dimitar will join it back in a second. I also understand to some extent from a club's perspective the situation, right? So as much as I think it would have been fair, and without the Euros, then we would have been in a slightly different situation, because if there wasn't a tournament this summer, then Maresca would have had Gallagher in training in pre-season and would have seen him, and maybe he would have, I don't know, changed his mind on him, because seemingly he also said this about Noni Madueke. He was not particularly convinced, or he had some doubts about Madueke before joining, and now he actually thinks Madueke suits his football quite well. So who knows whether that could or could not have happened with Conor Gallagher. But because of the Euros and he wasn't involved in pre-season, that wasn't going to happen. But because he's now going into the last year of his contract, the club will just simply not give him a new long-term contract. We've learned that. And also he, very rightly so in my opinion, does not want to sign a 2+1 year contract at Chelsea, even if they had fairly good wages and whatever else. even though reportedly he actually considered signing that, which in my opinion makes me love him even more, because if you consider signing a 2+1 year contract that to me is nothing but a fuck off, here's the door kind of offer, then how bloody Chelsea can you be? But it wouldn't have been particularly healthy if he spent most of the season on the bench. He would have decreased in value, well, or left up for free, obviously, last time if we didn't give him a contract. But even if we gave him a contract, sure, the contract would have been longer. But if he now doesn't play, then the value would have decreased. So it probably had to happen. I just don't know why we had to. I just find it utterly despicable of the club again that they try to vilify the homegrown players. Like, just be honest. Like, everyone with a brain in the fan base understands what's happening anyway. You're trying to sell for pure profit, which is the only part that I find a bit weird. You spoke about it earlier, Pice, in terms of that we lowered the price for Gallagher, therefore they lowered the price for Omorodion. But Gallagher for us is pure profit. So isn't that bad for us? Surely we would have preferred to spend a bit more on Omorodion, but sell Gallagher for a bit more. Surely because of pure profit, that would have been better for us than lowering both prices. But anyway, I don't know. Maybe they were just that desperate to get rid of him. But yeah, it is what it is. We move on. Let's see what happens with Chalobah. Supposedly, Palace interested. We might bring that up later on as well if we still have the time. But let's get into the game from last night. Real Madrid 2, Chelsea 1 in the end. Although Chelsea put it up the other direction. Pice, I'll start with you again. What did you make of the game? Obviously, we were losing quite early again. So that was brilliant. And also, like in the last couple of games, as soon as we concede another one very soon after. So that's a real issue. But yeah, what did you make of the game overall? And obviously, I think everyone's kind of has picked out two major concerns here. We can't defend, and left wing is a problem. But yeah, what did you make of the game yesterday, Pice?
Yeah, I guess it leads into some of my frustrations in the market because, like, we've been linked to a winger, but if we get a winger, it's going to end up being someone with, potential and isn't the finished product, or at least maybe even not even better than our current wingers. But the game last night was, I enjoyed it in certain aspects, and in other aspects, I was like, holy shit, like we're fucked. Like it was. I mean, all of the games have been like that for me. I'm like, I don't really know what to think. Like on the ball, there's clear patterns of play, there's a clear system. I think we're good going forward. We always create chances. I liked how we play through the press. I think it's good. Lavia especially has been one of the key elements to that. I think everything good so far goes through Lavia deepest. He's definitely, really good at picking up the ball deep, receiving the ball. Gusto as well, inverting from left back has been very, very impressive, and just goes to show how much of a quality player he is. The fact that he's an out-and-out right back and he's defending left back on the ball and inverting into midfield from the opposite side of his own position. So I've really enjoyed those two. But obviously the main thing, which everyone can see, the manager can see it himself. Yeah, the defensive line, when to push up, when to drop is not getting across to them at the moment. He said obviously after Celtic we need to work on it. Obviously the Club America game was a bit better, but they're not Real Madrid or Man City. And they don't, they're not, as soon as you had someone on the ball last night, like a Modric or someone, a bit of movement in behind, we were just too high, and it was, drop a ball in behind. The centre backs they're trying to shuffle back and defend backwards, and they're getting caught because unlike Spurs, who also do this under Ange, we don't have a Van de Ven. We don't have a Kyle Walker at Man City when they play a high line. We don't have anyone like that to save us. The quickest player we have probably right now is probably Reece James. He's not 100% fit. Wesley Fofana as well. Like was obviously very quick recovery pace before he got injured, but he's had an ACL.
He doesn't look quick at the moment, does he?
I just don't think, like, if you want to defend like this, obviously, he's already said like we need to make adjustments, but we're still going to like defend pretty high. So I just feel like we either need to keep Chalobah and play him regularly because he's quick, or you go and sign a quick centre back, because otherwise I don't see how we just don't concede goals left, right, and centre. I'm less worried about the on-ball stuff because I feel like, as you play more together, I feel like you'll be better and you'll understand the movement more and you'll make less mistakes. But you can't like deny that the off-the-ball stuff in terms of like the shape is terrible. It's terrible right now. It's all over the place. And yes, they need to learn, but like how many? This the thing is, like, if we start the Premier League slow, and it takes like 10 games for us to sort out this shape, how far behind will we be? Will we already be playing catch up? For top four, it just seems
but
just like last season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you always play catch up when you have a team like we do and you keep changing manager every year. Like if you have an inexperienced team and you bring in a new inexperienced manager, of course you're going to play catch up all season. Like even if we had the best preseason ever with planning and not a single second spent outside of Europe, all of the games within the UK, only training, and we would still have been playing catch up because the squad we have and the manager we have, obviously. So that part to me isn't surprising, but obviously you're 100% right still. And it's such a weird one to me because I'm not really as 100% sure as you are that it's all about pace. Now, I get your example with Van der Ven and with Walker, fair enough. But I think it's more about reading of what's happening. Like Colwill, Badia Shield, Reece James, they all played like they were wearing goggles or something, or like an eye mask. Like someone was making a run. Reece James is literally looking at Vinicius Jr. starting a run, and Reece James only turned around to follow him when Vinicius Jr. was already 3 yards past him. I'm like, well, if you're going to be that slow, it doesn't matter what system you play, it's not going to be good defensively. And that's kind of also what we saw last season. Sure, you can say Poch's system isn't good defensively. We can also just say our defenders aren't that good. Shock. Do you know what I mean? And the goalkeeper on top of that. So it's part of it is obviously pace. Sure, in terms of recovery, absolutely, that will make a difference. If you play a bit riskier, you will need recovery pace. But how many defenders will you find in the world that will have the recovery pace to catch up to Vinicius Jr.? Now, sure, like you said, you don't play Vinicius Jr. every week, but even Kyle Walker, if Vinicius Jr. has a 10-yard head start, Kyle Walker ain't catching him either. Do you know what I mean? So like with certain players, if the opponent just has a really fast players, you're not even going to get fast enough centre-backs to really make up for that if they don't read the game properly. And part of me still feels like, first of all, as much as I find it funny that Maresca kind of blamed almost Poch for the bad defending, which is kind of weird. I'll bring that up later. But part of me is also like, no. What do you mean you're blaming the last manager for this? No, like if anything, the problem here is that the team is used to Gallagher winning the ball back, and now that's not happening anymore. So we're getting way more counterattacks all of a sudden. Shock. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that makes a much bigger difference than, I don't know. We didn't even play such a high line last season under Poch. So I really don't understand what Maresca is talking about. I also, like 3 days ago, he was talking about how he never saw a man-to-man press from Chelsea. And now he's talking about the high line defending is Pochettino's fault. So which one is it? Were we too aggressive or not? And aggressive enough? Which one? I don't understand. But yeah, as for the game, I kind of agree with what Pai said. Going forward, I'm more than happy with what we've seen so far, if I'm being honest. To me, it's been surprisingly good going forward so far. And in forward areas, that's where we're missing the most important players. Like when we don't have Palmer and we don't have Jackson, our two by far biggest goal contributors last season. And those are the two players that haven't even featured yet. So going forward, it's not really my concern at the moment. Now, you could make an argument that we're going forward half decent or decent because we let so much happen at the back, and that allows us to be a bit better going forward. But defensively, it's a worry. Dimitar, do you think this can be fixed? Because I don't think this can be fixed at all by the time we play Man City. This will take longer than that. And then we'll have a bad start. Someone said it earlier in the chat. This team is a few heavy defeats away from absolute capitulation because we have no experience to keep the team alive once we have a few heavy defeats. We have an inexperienced manager who's never experienced staying at the club with a few defeats because he's been at Parma 14 games, got sacked, and then obviously he won the league with Leicester, so he never lost a lot of games to like be in this bad spell. So if we have a bad start to the season, God knows what happens. And that's why I'm like, if we have a decent start to the season, I think we could have an okay season and could come anywhere between 4th and 6th. I think we could. But if we have a bad start to the season, God knows what's going to happen. I just don't see how he's going to fix this. Now, in defense, sure, Cucurella will come in. But is Cucurella going to be the guy that solves these kind of problems that we've had so far? I don't think that's the problems that Cucurella solves, especially with how good Gusto has been at inverting anyway. I don't think the increase of ability, if you add Cucurella, is going to be that much better. So, Dimitar, what do you think about the defensive issues? And obviously speak about the offense as well, if we want to touch on a few positives as well, I suppose.
In the last 2 games, I saw us create some chances. I still don't think that we have seen consistently what this offensive potential can do, because I think some of the chances that we have created are purely due to individual skill. And now there is nothing wrong with individual skill, but the whole point that we signed Maresca is that we can continuously and sustainably create chances. even without relying on individual moments, because under Poch, a lot of the goals were individual moments, if we look at it how it was. Now, the defensive part, I am also very shocked at the high line which we are attempting. Even though Maresca himself, he said something that he doesn't think we should play a high line, but we played it, and his staff told him not to play it, something like that. Or I'm confusing some interviews, but so we again played a relatively high line yesterday, and against City in the first half, in my opinion, which is not the way I imagined this formation in general. And yeah, I think that if he goes a little bit back on the high line, we can fix some of the issues. But my theory from last season was that our acquisitions in midfield are just not good enough to control the midfield in regardless of the formation. And I think what we saw yesterday, particularly between the 10th and 40th minute, where I think Real Madrid were all over us, is that once they basically go through the middle circle, we have nothing to stop them. They just pass through Lavia, either with passes or just run at him and just pass him. And I'm not sure he did a lot defensively. Like, starting attacks, he was perfect. Like, passing forward, cutting through the lines, that impressed me for sure. He even, I think there's even a highlight or a small clip of a couple of passes to Nkunku, which he did yesterday, which were very good, which also started a couple of our most dangerous attacks. And I think even he passed the ball to Enzo, who then made the cross for Noni. So offensively, he has been above expectations. I think defensively, he also still doesn't know what his position or what his positioning should exactly be. And I am not convinced that we have enough to make the defense as good as people want it to be. So the season will be interesting and long, is what I would have to say in terms of defense.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, especially what you spoke about in terms of midfield. And I'll come to you with that, Pies, because last season, that was obviously something I spoke about a lot. And there was a lot of people saying, like, Caicedo's been good. And I'm like, okay, maybe. But as a collective, our midfield didn't stop anything or anyone ever going through us. Now, that's kind of to an extent happening again, even though I think individually, Gusto and Lavia, those two obviously having played in these positions the most this preseason, individually, they've been two of our best players, I felt. But still, opponents go through our midfield quite easily, like Dimitar just touched on. The question is just, and I feel it is a bit different to under Poch last season, but I feel like
for sure it is.
No, but I meant more in the sense of that we are more happy for this to happen this season, where it's almost like part of the structure is almost, okay, we play quite high. Therefore, when we have the ball, we will not have these gaps between our players, which we did on the Poch last season, which stopped some of our build-up play. But we are aware and we take the risk consciously that people will be able to play balls over the top, and then we need to recovery defend. So, Pies, where do you stand? Do you feel people going through our midfield is a problem? Is it just the defense? It's so strange. I'll bring up this quote from Maresca now, if I can actually find it again. Yeah, this one. We're trying to drop the defensive line a little bit, usually about 4 or 5 meters, just to have some advantage. Last year, we already conceded many goals with this problem. Hopefully, we can solve it very soon. So, again, that's kind of ways hinting at, well, this was a problem from last year. And then there's a bit more. It says it's trying to get Pochettino out of his Chelsea players. Essentially, we're not working on a defensive line so high. It's a habit from last year. And then the last one to bring up on this one, that's a bit the most clear and the most conclusive, I guess. Defensively, we had some problems. We need to adjust. Offensively, once again, we created 6-7 chances. The problem for me is defensively. We need to improve not just the defensive line, but all the team. So, Pies, where do you stand on the defensive issues? Like, is it the personnel? Is it the structure? Is it a mix of both? Is it just, part of the process? Obviously, new manager, new style of playing. It's going to take a bit of time until it all settles and works. Where do you stand on it? Because at the moment, it's a bit worrying. Like, we've played how many preseason games? 5, right? So we've conceded 2 against Wrexham. We conceded. How many did we concede against Celtic?
Celtic 4, I think 4.
Yeah, conceded 4 against Celtic. Conceded none against Club America. Okay, great. Conceded 4 against City and conceded 2 against Real Madrid. And Inter Milan still to come. So let's see how many we concede against them. That is a bit concerning, especially while, okay, sure, we create quite a bit, but we fail to actually convert our chances. Like, I know Dimitar was talking about individual brilliance. I'm not really sure about that. I think there's been actually nice patterns to create openings for the wingers, to give them space, to allow them fairly comfortable cut-ins, chances, or crosses. Unfortunately, in particular, Sterling It's messed up every easy cross he's had, even though could have had like 4 or 5 tap-ins over the last 2 games for Gil, for Nkunku, for Madueke, for various players. But the ball just never went to them, so we never had the tap-in. But defensively, it's a big concern. Like, the high line is one thing, but even when we're not having a high line, Reece James in the one we won against Vinicius made look like an absolute clown. Colwell, the ball's bouncing around in the box. He tries to clear it, clears it 3 meters wide. Like Badiashile, Colwell and Badiashile, they could not be fucked to run. Like, I know it's preseason and it's been very hot and they've been a lot of training, a lot of traveling, a lot of everything. So I understand that the intensity, that the energy isn't going to be quite there where it will be against Man City on match day 1 of the Premier League. But also, it's about habits. If you get into the habit of not sprinting your soul out to get back when the opponent is countering, you're going to be in that habit. And are you really going to do that the second it happens in the league? Because they didn't last year. And I also felt Colwell and Badiashile, the two in particular, were the two most often not sprinting back as quickly as I maybe would have liked sometimes. So I have real worries about the defense. And obviously first against Celtic, I was like, well, yeah, Reece midfield in that game still. And then he obviously played right centre back against Club America. Of course, very different opponent, but still, it felt better. But yesterday, my God, the whole back three, it seemed like a whole calamity. Like, Colwell's passing was decent, but defensively, they were all terrible. And offensively, Reece didn't do anything, didn't keep the ball well at all. And by this year, I can't really remember if I thought he was good in passing forward or not. So, well, tell me your thoughts, Pice, and also tell me, what do we do now? And, like, can Cucurella really have this drastic of an impact? Like I say, in attack, at least we've got Palmer, Jackson, and now Omorodion still to add, where we're like, there's still some unknown. But in defense, this is probably going to be our team, except that Reece James is going to be suspended for the first 3 games. So it's going to probably have to be Fofana, who's looked even worse than Reece James. So, you know what I mean? Like, how many goals are we going to concede on match day 1, man?
Yeah, I think we need to chill a little bit, though. Like, it's very early days, and I think Maresca's, the good thing about Maresca is
it early? It's 10 days to the first game.
Lawrence. We've not started the season yet, Lawrence.
It's early days in the grand scheme of things, for sure. But it's only 10 days until the first game. How much improvement can we still do in that period?
Well, we'll see. But the good thing is, Lawrence, he's identified the issues, hasn't he? So he knows what's wrong, and it's not like he's not seeing what's going on. And at the end of the day, we're in a new, trying to learn a completely new system, something very different from last season. And it's, for me, it's not an individual thing. Obviously, individuals in the defense have not played well, but I think it's more a collective thing. Especially tracking back, like the number 8s need to track back more often than not. Like, they need to be on it all the time, the same as the wingers, because as soon as we push higher, we lose the ball, and because it's a transition thing, right? It's not really when they're on the ball and we're settled. It's more when we lose the ball and it's a transition and they sort of counter-attack us and our shapes all over the place. So what the number 8s need to do is they need to track back. They need to make sure they know exactly what positions they need to be in and when. And unfortunately, when you've got Nkunku, I mean, he's been doing good, like, on the ball, but off the ball, I don't think Nkunku's the best, obviously. And, that's where I feel like Dewsbury Hall may come in. Because of the work rate off the ball.
Perhaps, looks so slow. Am I the only one that's felt this? Watching him play, he looks so slow.
Yeah, but also, like, I mean, I don't know if I should say this because it does sound like a little bit ridiculous, but I'd heard as well. Someone had told me that some of the players were being careful that they didn't overdo it and get injured on these pitches as well. So.
We'll more than reasonable if that's the case. More than reasonable.
We'll see. Fitness levels are different for each player as well right now. And the Inter Milan game. Let's see how we do at home. Let's see, how quickly.
Let's see how the pitch is at home. Because remember the Soccer Aid one? Do you know what I mean?
Oh
my
God! Yeah.
Even at home. We talk about pitches in America. Okay. Let's wait and see about our own pitch, man.
It will be okay, but let's wait and see. Let's trust Maresca to fix it. Clearly, the idea that he has is not what we're seeing on the pitch right now. This drastic of an extent anyway. And I'm just waiting for that game, hopefully soon, or even if it's in a 30-minute period where, he comes out after the game and he says, right, look, you see in this moment of the match, this is what I wanted off the ball, right? And then you can see, okay, so that's how it's supposed to look. And then you can work from that. Whereas I feel like, in the second half as well, like in the first half, we've been playing like really strong 11s, right, against really strong 11s. In the second half, like Real Madrid, I was like, okay, let's see what's different. Let's see if it changes or whatever after half time. But really, Real Madrid just kind of chilled for a bit. You know, they were kind of sort of, you know, you didn't really see it tested again much in the second half, to be honest, because they took Vini and Rodrygo off after a few minutes, 20 or so minutes, and they would just kind of like, the tempo dropped completely. So I'm waiting for that game or that moment within the game where it's, I'm waiting for that moment within the game where I can see like, okay, this is what he wants, and now this is what to expect from the players. Because right now we don't really know who's doing what role well or not, because we don't know what he actually has pictured for the off the ball shape. To be honest, we're just going off like what we think as fans should happen. But clearly, he's trying to teach a system, and you know, again, I'll say it. But this is the problem with having a lot of young players, right? They're, you know, they you know, take a lot of information in, but they don't necessarily understand it as quickly as older players. So that's one of the negatives as well of having a very young team.
100%. And also just the experience of working on the different tactical setups makes it easier for you to understand the new tactical setup. Just when you have a better understanding of tactics in football in general, I think just makes it a bit easier. I think you made a very good point in terms of that it's mostly transition moments. So part of it, as much as we talk about the defensive line, and even Maresca has spoken about defensively, right? I think a point to make is also the better we get on the ball, the more the players get adapted to the system on the ball, because it was former Leicester players of last season, and I think Dewsbury Hall as well. We're talking about how under Maresca, once you like have settled and everything, and you know what the manager wants, everyone knows where each teammate is supposed to be. And if we get to that point, then we should also give the ball away less. Therefore, we should have less transition moments against us because we give the ball away less. So part of it, as much as we talk about the defense has been the issue and offensively has actually been quite good, if we become better at building, at keeping the ball, not even just creating a chance, but also keeping the ball, you know, whatever else, applying pressure without necessarily playing that final ball where you could potentially lose it in the box. If you lose the ball less, you're going to have way less transition moments against you. So that is the case. But the question is just how long is it going to take? And that's where I have my worries, because think back to Maurizio Sarri, right? I said at the time, give it until October, November, we'll be good. But it wasn't really in October, November that we got good. If anything, that's when we started to get even worse, weirdly. And then only like come March did we get good again. So, and if this is a similar situation, we're not going to come third like we did on Sarri because we don't have fucking Hazard. So it's going to be very different. And that's just the part that I'm concerned about, because the expectation from the club, the target from the club is top 4. A lot of fans' target is top 4. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying I just think it's quite unlikely. And if that's our expectations, that just means more toxicity. And that just means everything's going to be bad again. And that's the part that concerns me. And if we don't get Champions League money again, we're going to sign average players again. And then how are we ever going to improve? I don't know. But yeah, it's the defense in itself. I don't know. A lot of people in the chat is now talking about like, okay, Varna is in particular spoken about, you know, finally people realize that Colwell is crap. Well, I think Colwell was by far the least of our issues yesterday, personally.
For sure.
Like, he was by far the best at passing and made the least defensive errors. Now, sure, on that goal that they scored, he definitely didn't track back anywhere near quickly enough. And that needs to be said, and that shouldn't happen, absolutely. But, you know, like Pies touched on the whole when Real Madrid makes subs and everything else. Now, sure, the goals happened before they made subs, so this is irrelevant for this. But even regardless, when they made subs and we didn't really improve or whatever else, yes, we had the better team on the pitch, but also we were tired and their players were fresh, because you got to think 5th preseason game in the space of 15 days, in the space of traveling across 4 or 3 different time zones, flying every second day, new hotel every day. Like, you're not going to be at peak fitness, right? So like that makes understand. That makes total sense. But yeah, it's tricky. I do still like how we like to set up. I'm just a little bit concerned. Like, I think this is going to kill our wingers. When I see Madueke on the ball, everything attacking that we do that's good was either Enzo or Madueke in doing anything into the final third. I'm not saying Nkunku did nothing, but you know, I felt like the last moment when someone was supposed to make someone happen, it was Enzo or Madueke. But then when we lost the ball, sometimes I saw Madueke sprint like an absolute madman to try and protect, kind of like almost as a right wing back. And I'm like, if he's going to have to do this all season, he's not going to be fit for very long. And we don't have a fucking other right winger. So what the flip are we going to do? And Cole Palmer certainly isn't going to run all the way back to defend next to Reece James. That's for fucking sure. Why do you think Cole Palmer is going to play as a central eight under Maresca? Because he knows Palmer ain't going to do that, running all the way back to next to Reece James. So what we really should be doing is sign William back, because at least he'd be doing the track and back. But yeah, I mean, obviously, another interesting point to make, and you can see it on screen, we only made 3 subs yesterday. Obviously, Mudryk and Caicedo coming on after 58, and then Fofana coming on the 70th. There were only 3 subs. They're still preseason, and it wasn't our last preseason game either. So I found this particularly interesting, if I'm being honest. Now, I'll go with Pice again, and then I'll come to Dimitar so we have this conversation, because something that I think isn't being talked about enough, I think it's come out a little bit the last few days, and CFC Daily in particular has spoken about it a few times. But how many more bad preseason plans are we going to have? Because, like, when we played Real Madrid yesterday, every other Premier League team was already back in Europe, whether they were in the UK or somewhere else in Europe. They were already back. We're only going back now. We played more games outside of Europe than any other club in the Premier League. And we traveled, and we essentially did a worse preseason than last year and made it nearly as bad as the first one under Thomas Tuchel, where Kovacic, Aspi, Tuchel said this has been the worst preseason we have ever experienced. And even Enzo Maresca, you can see that he doesn't really want to criticize too much yet or ever. I don't know. But even he's like, when he came off the bus at Cobham, finally back home yesterday, it's like, yeah, it was been difficult. We've barely had time to train. I'm like, so does this think like a football club that thinks about being successful as a football club? When there's people in charge, are sporting directors who have worked at football clubs before. And you have a manager saying, yeah, basically, we've played way too many games, we have way too much travel, and we don't actually have enough time to travel at all. And he essentially said, our preseason was the 2 weeks at Cobham, not even on preseason, on preseason tour in America. And don't forget that. So what the manager calls our only preseason, and now that we're back, that's preseason as well, he says, when we were at Cobham, not only didn't we have Palmer and Jackson available and Cucurella, we also didn't have Enzo and Caicedo. That's 4 or 5 players that are starters that weren't even there. So what our manager calls preseason, half of our starting 11 wasn't there for. And then the rest was just terribly planned. And especially, like you touched on it earlier, Pies, in terms of catching up. Such a bad preseason just means we have to do even more catching up. Like, this is one of the most baffling things. Like, I'll get to the super chat by Facey in a minute. Thank you very much. The Chelsea artist said, I'm just grateful for no injuries so far. That is by far the best thing that has come out of this preseason, by the way, that we didn't get any new big injuries or any injuries. That is fantastic. Now, let's not jinx it and touch wood, because we still have one to go at the bridge. But yeah, I mean, Pice, on everything that I've waffled on about, essentially about preseason, essentially hampering our preparation for the season. Like, I know you need to make money, but not a single game, not even against Real Madrid, was sold out. So, like, did we really make that much more money than we would have just, I don't know, playing in God knows where? I mean, the last 2 times Chelsea won the league, by the way, we did preseason in Austria. So maybe we should be doing that again. I mean, never done anything good after going to America. But yeah, but where do you stand on the whole preseason stuff? And also 3 subs yesterday after complaining we've played too much. Like, doesn't that contradict itself a little bit too?
No, because I think he wants to get, pretty much, we're near the end of pre-season, so he wants to get, basically his main team pretty much to get, as much of the minutes in the legs. They need to start playing 90 minutes, 80, 90 minutes. So
I get that, but at the same time, if they're tired, does that help?
Well, I don't.
And they clearly were tired.
Also, keep in mind we have 2 playoff games for the Conference League, which are, I think, in 2 weeks.
Yeah, the next Conference League game is going to be not long after the Prem starts.
Yeah.
It's like, these other players will play as well soon. But anyway, sorry, Pice, go on. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I agree with you. I agree that the planning has it's been terrible. With the amount of flights, we've had literally some games we literally played and just flew straight away to the next thing. They didn't even have a rest during the night. They just flew straight away and stepped on the plane. So yeah, I mean, that's why in certain aspects I'm being quite positive, because what we have seen on the ball, considering how little training we've had, is very impressive. But maybe that's why I'm not so worried about, the whole off the ball thing. But Yeah, I think going back to Cobham now, look, we've not got long before Inter Milan, but at least we're back home and in obviously surroundings that everyone likes. Because I don't think any of the players like going there, to be honest. Like I'm sure they like the country, but they certainly don't like traveling all the time to different states and stuff. So if you're going to do an American pre-season, which is going to happen because we've got American owners, I don't expect that to change. At least have the games close to each other. Like don't be so stupid and like travel after a game and then be like, oh, okay, Maresca, you've got 1 day training before Celtic, for example. And it's like, well, what do you expect him to do 1 day? Like fucking work miracles or something, Like it's ridiculous for any coach. You could have Pep Guardiola, right? And he still wouldn't fucking sort this out within 1 day of training.
And
before
like,
next game,
sure, America is huge, but there is also big cities quite close to each other. Like you could play in Boston and in New York. It's like 3 hours in between by car. It's like not. I think it's not that far. Like even if you have to fly, it's half hour to 1 hour flight. It's not that bad. But no, of course we have to start in LA. And then we're playing Charlotte, like at the very East Coast in North Carolina. In between that, we're playing in Ohio. Like, yeah, both kind of East Coast. Look at the map. That's about as far as going from the UK to fucking Bulgaria. You have Bulgarians sat here, so that's my example. I mean, that's about as far as that is. I mean, like, it's mental to do this with 3 days gaps. Like this, our preseason plan in the season would go against FIFA rules. That's how close these games have been to each other. Closer than would be allowed in competitive games. Like, why anyone does this to ourselves? And a new manager, when games don't even matter. Like Maresca even said, we use the games for training sessions. That's also why I wouldn't be that's why I'm not, as much as I said, big concern the defense, but that's why I'm not actually that concerned, because I'm like, we didn't even have time to properly train. So if we're essentially using games as training sessions, I'm not going to lose my mind over what happens in these games. But it's just dumb to me. I mean, Dimitar, I don't know how much more there is to add after what Pice and I have already complained about in terms of the preseason. But like the first time, as much as it was already stupid then, I can maybe let them off a little bit because I'm like, well, this was your first time. So fair enough. But now this is the third preseason that it has been essentially planned under this ownership. And my God, why are we doing this to ourselves? Like, why don't we help ourselves? I don't get it.
I mean, yeah, you guys completely hit the nail on the head. I think this is problematic in only one sense. It's problematic because they sold the entire coach change to a philosophy change. They said, we want to play in a different style, we want to do this, this, and that. And then they immediately start by sabotaging the manager, because this is sabotaging the manager. I mean, if you really want to start playing a new style, if you want to make a complete turnaround, if you want to play great brand-friendly football, like possession football, then you stay at Cobham the entire summer or go to Austria and make sure that your coach has as much as training with these players as possible. And they kind of did the opposite, which is, again, you said third summer preseason in a row. They messed things up. In my opinion, they also messed a lot of things up in the fourth or fifth transfer window in a row. So I think they're not realizing that they're making mistakes. I'm pretty sure if you ask the decision-making people, everything or almost everything which they have done so far has worked out, and what has not worked out will work out. I'm pretty sure that is their modus operandi. They think that everything will work out, but you can't keep relying on that, I think. So I just hope that Maresca realizes what he got himself into, and I hope he can kind of find a way to play around the board and maybe be a little less problematic than Pochettino. Because you said earlier something I found funny. What if Maresca actually had a preseason with Gallagher and liked him? Can you imagine a second manager in a row basically going head-to-head with the board over Gallagher? That would have been funny for us.
Thing for this board, because I wouldn't have put it past Gallagher to fight this game like he's done with every other manager so far.
Yeah,
I mean, them like him.
Yeah, maybe he's also a very nice bloke. That's why people like him. So I don't know, but yeah, I'm not sure that the board know what they need to do to support and create a good environment for a manager. Because regardless of what you believe is the right way to play football, if you have a happy manager who gets what he needs, who gets what he wants, who can work in peace, you will get better results, even if you don't think that the brand of football is as good as it can be. So yeah, let's just hope Maresca can pull off some miracles in that regard.
Exactly. I do still like. I actually really like Maresca, and I've kind of attached is maybe the wrong word, but I've really grown to be quite. I don't know. Like I feel I feel better represented than I did from Poch. Now, sure, because Spurs legend, but I don't know. It just feels like the kind of guy that is like, okay, you seem like you have the authority to be a good manager. You seem like you have an idea tactically. You seem everything. Every time something goes wrong, you speak about the one thing that we all know goes wrong, and you're like, okay, we need to work on this. As much as it maybe wasn't fixed the next day, like Pi said earlier, the most important thing is first of all to see the mistake. There was times last season when all of us were like, why is this happening? And then Poch was asked about it. He's like, that's not even the problem or whatever. And then I'm like, sure, Poch can have his own opinion, and maybe he was more right than I was. But, at least I feel like the manager sees the same issues that I see. So then I don't know. I feel like it's more easy to follow along, if that makes sense. But I need to get to the super chat. Thank you very much for the $9.99, mate, by Facey 009. Are you British? Are you American and just living in America and donating dollars? 009, maybe just as James Bond fan from America. He says, thank you, Pice. I think alluding back to what you said earlier, Pice, in terms of the goals we conceded is from us losing the ball and getting caught up the pitch. Look at the tactic on the screen. It looks like a football manager setup. It's not sustainable. So on the one hand, he kind of like thanked you and agreed with you, Pice. On the other hand, he kind of disagreed with you because I don't think you see it this way. So what is your reaction to this? Because obviously, just to clarify to maybe people that didn't have time to watch every game or whatever else. So off the ball, how this moves is then Gusto comes back into the left back. And then you'd think, okay, then we have a back four. But that isn't even really fully the case. What actually happens is then the right winger drops deep and essentially forms a back five. And then you have Lavia here, kind of Enzo drops to here. I don't really know what Sterling does. I wouldn't say it ends into this. I'm not 100% sure what the forward line does, because obviously when you watch a game on TV and then we fall back into this, the ball is going to be somewhere here, so the camera doesn't film these people. So it's a bit more difficult if you're not in the stadium to know where do they actually go. So that will be easier to say, well, once either I go to a game or I speak to people that have been to games to make judgment on these things. But essentially, the defensive line falls into a bit of a back five. Now, Madueke obviously takes a bit longer to get there than Gusto, who's closer, only going out from the central midfield position. Is it maybe a bit one of those? But Sterling does certainly track back as well. I don't know. Do you leave these two? Is it one of these? I don't know. Like, you can also call it a 4-4-2 off the ball, but Madueke certainly drops deep to help out the right defender, I suppose. So it's not like what I had on screen earlier remains that way the whole game, which thankfully, because that would be suicide. It needs that kind of mix of things. The problem that I just have is we have too many players that, for me, don't fit exactly what they're trying to do. Now, with Reece James, he can do these things. He just needs to stop being lazy. Being lazy as a right wing back, one thing. Being lazy as a right centre back, big problem. And the problem is these three centre backs that played yesterday, they all have a bit of a tendency to be a bit lazy, which is why it's concerning. Which is why we miss people like Thiago Silva, or will miss people like Thiago Silva. That's not Fofana. Fofana is more in the other direction of potentially being too rash, a bit like a Disasi. Disasi is also not going to be lazy. So that's one positive. If Disasi ever becomes fit again, unless they lie to us, then the reason he's not being used isn't even to do with not being fit. It's because Maresca doesn't like him. Who knows? But yeah. Pice, as a last question, because I know you need to head off as well. From what you've seen so far, who would you play as our back three, if we call it that?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is where I don't really think it matters who you play at the moment. If the structure, the shape stays the same, everyone's going to get destroyed. So, if everything's settled, I would probably play Cucurella, Cole, and James. To be honest, but yeah, that
and have Gusto as the inverting left back next to Cucurella.
Yeah, probably.
Isn't that a lot of non-defenders having to defend, or not non-central defenders having to do central defense work?
I mean, it's one. I guess with Reece James, it's two, I suppose. Yeah, true.
Yeah, but the thing is with James, I don't really know where to fit him in, because I didn't really like him inverted. I guess you could push him up, and maybe have Palmer moving centrally, but
maybe to be fair, first game James isn't going to play anyway. So against Man City, what without James, does it just Fofana come in there for you, or Gusto? Does Gusto play right centre back then? So he would at least have the base for recovery defending.
I feel like what he might do is he might start Fofana against Inter, and if he does alright and it goes decent, I feel like he might start in the first game. Because I
this sounds logical.
Probably won't be Disasi because he's not played. So Tosin he's mainly played in the middle. So I guess it would probably have to be Fofana, unless he does something completely different. I don't know, but you'd probably say it's Fofana right now with the biggest shout.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's I really don't know, because I don't trust Cucurella as the left centre back. I know he's done that at Brighton and the Potter, but I don't trust him there. I think he's too short for back post crosses. I think it's a problem, even for Spain in the Euros. The one issue that he was amazing at pretty much everything except back post crosses. Like he lost their head ever duels to Kimmich, who Kimmich is sure he's taller than Cucurella, but not much. And still, Cucurella was nowhere near defending it. So what on earth do you do? Imagine Cucurella ends up being against Haaland in the air. Good luck with that. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you're going to be, and it's not like you can say, oh yeah, but he's not going to be up against that player. Yeah, but the opponents aren't stupid either. They look at our team, they see, okay, Cucurella's playing left centre back, and let's put our tall guy there and cross their role. You know, they're not idiots. So that's would be my concern about Cucurella. But the problem is, I don't rate Badiashile as a left centre back. And Colwell as a left centre back, unless he somehow gets surprisingly quickly way better as a defending wide areas, which he hasn't been good at all at so far. I don't think we have the perfect player for this position at all. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there was one of the ideas, which isn't left centre back then, but one of the ideas that Conor had is like you can play Caicedo is kind of like what Gusto does, play left back and then invert, but that doesn't fix the left centre-back situation either. So, essentially, one of Colwell or Badiashile just needs to fix up, really, and in defending wide areas, because otherwise we're just going to be screwed. We're just going to be screwed. But, yeah, I think it's about time we leave this at this one. I guess there's a couple of more things. I guess, Pice, you haven't told me you need to go immediately, so I'm going to ask you this one still. Chelsea are in a game of poker with Napoli. Chelsea want Lukaku's full £37 million release clause paid, but Napoli haven't followed up with a bid and may wait to see if Chelsea's stance softens. Chelsea would take Osimhen on loan, despite being expected to sign Omorodion. That was a few hours before here we go on that, if a deal could be struck. And also, Fabrizio said yesterday that as far as he is aware, we haven't yet at least officially left the race for Osimhen. So what happens with Lukaku? What happens with Osimhen right now, in your opinion, Pice?
I think we end up. I don't want to say it. I feel like we do end up getting Osimhen, but
on a straight loan.
Yeah, but it only happens if other clubs don't come in for him, which is the nervous thing. Like, I think it's PSG.
But do you even still want Osimhen now that we've signed Omorodion? Like, what a waste of money Omorodion is then.
No, absolutely. Because I personally, I quite like Jackson out wide. So I know some people don't, but I do. So I wouldn't mind Jackson going out wide on the left and having Osimhen and Omorodion. I think that's quite a beefy attack, you know. I would definitely still like Osimhen. I've wanted him all summer, but it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot of convincing. Fab's been saying that it might go to the last week of the window. From what I know, Chelsea are just waiting to basically for Osimhen to say, okay, yeah, I'll go on loan with you, because he's had no one else so far. Apart from PSG came in for him, he agreed with PSG, but they didn't want to pay the release clause, and they've not come back in since. And Saudi Arabia, I mean, I don't think he'd go there over like coming to Chelsea, for example. I'd be surprised, even though they'd offer him a bag. But yeah, I just feel like Chelsea are waiting for this. They're, Napoli keep coming back to us, like, still talking. Chelsea are trying to, or Fab said the only way it could happen on like a permanent is Chelsea find some creative formula. So maybe it's a buy option into an obligation, like kind of like how Lewis Hall's one was. So Lewis Hall's.
What I asked myself about that? Why does it make it financially better?
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it seems like we don't want to sign him on a permanent. But
I think we just can't without having guarantees of making Champions League. I think that's the issue.
Yeah, but then again, though, like you think of it, like I know we've probably got maybe I haven't worked it out, but I feel like we're near a positive net spend because we've like basically sold and bought the same amount. So yeah, obviously it would be
and made the squad worse in the process. Brilliant.
But do you count the money spent on Estevao into that?
See, I don't know where. Yeah, I don't know. Like the ins and outs of like what books that goes on. Does that
No,
become...
Esteval only counts on the books next year, not now.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, it's my bad.
That's the thing. If we was to do an obligation, they'd go on the books next summer. So
Okay.
I don't know. Like they need to work it all
But
out.
then you'd also be adding a lot next summer because then you've got Kenry wasn't expensive, but then you've still got Esteval and a potential Osimhen next summer. So then you already know we're not signing anyone even remotely decent next summer either. Brilliant. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but then like it you know, like they've, according to Dimarzio, they wanted 60 mil plus Lukaku, right? So say if the you know, we got Osimhen obligation for like 50, 55 because he'd only have 1 year left on his contract, and we sold Lukaku to them. I don't think it would be too bad, to be honest. But it's the other things as well, like Fab keeps mentioning.
It's the wages, I think that's the bigger
200k plus wages. He's got an agent fee. So if Chelsea can get it on a loan, like assess it, he does really well. I feel like that's what they want to do. But so far, Osimhen's saying, no, I don't want to go on a loan, you know, like, so yeah, that's why nothing's changing. But say it's like another couple of weeks and Osimhen's still like, he hasn't got a club, then I think he might turn around and say, okay, I'll do a loan. I think that's what Chelsea are hoping for anyway.
And just quickly, if you look at Lukaku in isolation, do you think Lukaku to Napoli could happen also if Osimhen doesn't join us? Or do you think we won't let Napoli have Lukaku then? But I think we are more desperate to get rid of Lukaku than we are to sign Osimhen.
Lukaku's the interesting one in this because you know what he's like. He could soon turn around and say, right, I want this done by, you know, the next week or whatever. If not, I'm going to Saudi. Like, remember what he did with Inter Milan, right? He joined fucking... Who did he... Was it... He ditched Inter for... Roma, wasn't it? Like, it was like, out of nowhere, it was like Lukaku stopped speaking to Inter Milan. He now wants somewhere else. He's fed up of waiting.
Exactly.
So,
I think he also talked to Juventus, and that's why Inter backed out, and then he ended up at Roma.
That's it. Juventus was the one. And I remember that news drop, and I was like, this guy, man. So the fact that Conte's still there, though, might keep him waiting. And if not, I just hope it speeds up. Like, the thing is, we're still seemingly in there, even though we've signed Samu. So that gives me a little bit of hope. But again, it's like, we're just being opportunistic. It's on our conditions or nothing. You know, like we're not going out there and buying Osimhen. You know, we're not like putting our foot down or like it's just a lack of ambition from Chelsea this summer.
Or a lack of money. I mean, I don't think they can pay the money.
But is there though? Because if you spend like look how much
we spend we just spend 20 million.
Yeah. But the thing is, you guys saw that the Omorodion deal would not happen without us selling Gallagher. So this is the same. They need to first make sure Lukaku goes the other way, and then they make their financial scheme. So in a way, we're bargaining because we don't have the money. Because I'm sure if they had the money, we would have signed him. In the past, they did not waver to spend 120 million on a guy who played 3 months in Europe. So, and now they're like being cheap for 60 for Osimhen, who is supposedly a proven big star. I mean, 60 plus Lukaku, but I think really they're just doing their best not to mess up the books for next summer, even though they're doing it anyways, but they're just like to make minimal damage for the future because they saw what the last 2 summers did to this summer, probably.
I don't get it either. It's like when we signed like Kellyman for 19 million, and then the goalkeeper kid from Belgium for 20 million.
Also, the Portuguese guy Renato Vega, I believe was his name. Yeah, Renato Vega.
14 million euros. At least he was actually so cheap that it's almost like barely worth mentioning.
Yeah, but
that's at least something.
Things add up.
No, absolutely, they do add up. But then you're Gabriel Mech, we're supposedly going to sign for around 20 million as well. And then, like, obviously, he is
the goalkeepers, the goalkeepers, the Mark Giu, Caleb Willie, or that other young kid from Atlanta.
Yeah. It's just a little bit strange. I mean, if I bring up the squad that we have right now, it's mind-boggling. Like, look at this. What is this? And I tweeted it as well. Like, how ironically funny is it that we had 2 bigger squads 2 years ago? Sorry?
I said, whoever tweeted this out, it's just such a stupid tweet. Like, you can do this for Liverpool, you can do this for Arsenal, you can do this for any club.
I don't think you can.
You're literally what does Beach, Bergstrom, like half of these are academy, Achimpong, fucking Humphreys, Gilchrist, like
Yeah,
Look at
but
the
I
striker.
think
none of the Washington's not. He's either going to be under 21. Fofana's going. Guiu's going on loan. Like Lukaku's going. Gabriel. Like what's the
But
relevance?
I think the point isn't
Don't get it.
necessarily that they're all in the first team squad. The point is that we have this many players on our books,
and we are still
sure,
looking to sign
Bergström,
more.
Beach, and Gilchrist and Achimpong and Angerin, but very few of the others are true academy players nowadays. And George, who else is?
But
Like,
And
you-
also,
you've named,
guys,
what,
if
keep
they're
in
not-
mind,
a 41-man squad are academy players.
No, but
Like
I
that
don't
aren't
care
first
about
teamers, like
This-
James or whatever.
This is so stupid though, because as long as our squad is not like this on September 1st, it's absolutely irrelevant, and it won't be.
No,
So
it
what's
is
the
no,
point of
but
doing
it isn't. But that isn't true, though. It should be
is
by the
true.
first game of the season, but they won't get that done.
But none of these will
It
even
should
be on the bench
September 1st.
anyway.
It should
Like,
be
so
the
who
first
cares?
game.
yeah, but if we have all of these 40 players and we still, all of us know we need probably a new central defender, we need a new striker probably, a new right winger probably, and we need a new goalkeeper. And those are four
And a
big
new left
transfers
winger
on
probably
top
as
of
well.
this squad. And I think that's the problem. That we spent 5 billion pounds. We have 40 players on the books who could play in first team games, and we are still basically 4 out of 11 players short of a good team.
They couldn't play in first team games though, because I don't even consider half of these first team players, to be honest. They're irrelevant to Chelsea.
But that's
So,
the
yeah.
problem because we signed other than
Yeah, we paid money for a
other than
lot of them.
Tolbo, James, Beach, Bergström, Angerin. Well, actually, we sign Angerin from somewhere as well, and George. Every single player here has and Achimpong and Gilchrist and Humphreys, sorry, and Chalaban
there's quite
has
a lot
been
of them when you
signed
look at
though. Like
Yeah, but
Sanchez, Jorgensen, Bettinelli, Petrovic, Kepa, Badiashil, Tosin. Okay, he was free, but still. Chilwell, 50 million. Cucurella, 60 million. Wiley, no one will ever need him. Fofana, 80 million. Now back up to Reece James. Like, he's the best one of the lot for the position that we're lacking, and he's getting forced out. Like, Kellyman will never play for the club. Vega, mentioned as a midfielder when he's the most obvious centre-back you've ever seen. I mean, Casadei, we signed for 19 million before ever playing a professional game of football in his life. Dewsbury Hall is the most beat-tech Conor. He's not... The more I see of him, the more I think he's not even close to Conor Gallagher. He's baffling.
oh, he's not.
Hey, time can change. Like, he can still be amazing. But what I've seen so far, no one near as good as Conor Gallagher, in my opinion. Anyway, Sterling signed on 325k, can't even cross the ball 5 meters. And the squad is, and you talk about, Washington only is a 21 player. Yeah, but that's the
We
problem.
paid money for
We
him as
spent
well.
17 million on him
Yeah.
only to be good enough for our 21s. That's the whole problem. That's my whole worry.
Also, David Datro,
oh,
Fofana,
yeah,
Mudryk,
I think
Madueke.
I think you're misreading this though. Like, I'm not saying that with like obviously a lot of these signings are stupid in grand comparison. Like, but to just say, oh, look how big Chelsea's squad is. Like, you can do this, not as drag, but you can still do this for other top 6 teams. You just can.
No, I agree with that.
But, like,
the problem is
It's just
that
got a
2
media
years
agenda
ago,
against
right?
Chelsea. Like, just shut up and leave us alone. It's so annoying. I see all these tweets all the
I hear
time.
that, but don't you hear it as well that 2 years ago we had way too big of a squad, and a lot of the people in the squad at that time, you could also say, they're not even considered proper first team players. You could have said that about many of those players at the time too. But even still, that season, Potter, a lot of the players and the higher ups used the two bigger squad as a reason for why that season was so bad.
Yeah.
And now we're
But
2
they
years
were
later and we
established first-team
amass.
players still.
Like, you're right, they're not all in the first team squad. But still, what was the necessity of 95% of these players where you could have just saved some of that money, spent it more on a few individual players, and ended up with a better squad overall? And that's the part I don't
and
get,
not
you know what I mean?
selling Ruben Loftus-Cheek as well.
And that I will always go along with that. But yeah, a last thing that I really wanted to speak about earlier and almost takes us back to the Real Madrid game. One thing that we didn't touch on at all was Jorgensen playing the whole game. So, Dimitar, what do you make of Jorgensen yesterday?
I think that if I speak, I will be banned from Sweden and Denmark combined. I was really not impressed. He looked like he had all the bad qualities of Kepa combined with just a lack of reading the game because he didn't know when to come out. I was not impressed on crosses. I was not impressed with his positioning. And the way that Brahim Diaz just went past him was kind of embarrassing, I think.
Yeah.
You should not let that happen unless you're in an under 12s game and you're like blind. I don't know. It looked awful in real time and on the replays. It just looked awful. I don't know. I hope this kid can do something, because I'm also horrified by the possibility of having Sanchez for 38 Premier League games. I don't know. It's not a good time to be a Chelsea goalkeeper fan.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I didn't necessarily notice the crosses so much. The only cross that stands out in my mind with that one that he actually came for and punched away quite well. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. I just can't think of the cross as being necessarily the issue. But the Brahim Diaz goal, that was like, what is he doing? Why don't you come off your line, man? Like, we literally signed you to be a sweeper keeper and you're not coming off your line. What the fuck? Like, all he needed to do was 2 more steps and he could have picked the ball up. He wouldn't have even had to go on the ground. He could have just picked it up. I don't understand what he was doing, let alone Badiashile literally letting the ball roll across the line instead of stopping it, even though he's right there. The absolute moron. What I will say is, though, it took Jorgensen a combined total of 135 minutes, I guess, to prove to me that he's better at passing than Sanchez. So that's something.
But that's not hard. That's not hard.
No, absolutely. Very, very good point. But even still, that's supposedly why we kept him over Petrovic, isn't it? Because he's supposedly going to pass it. And it took Jorgensen 135 minutes to me, look better at it. Now, to be fair, I should say 90, because in the first half that Jorgensen played, he didn't look great at passing. But he didn't know his teammates yet. Like, he'd been there for a day. So I let him off for that first one. But yeah, I mean, Pice, what did you make of Jorgensen yesterday?
Not great, to be honest. I think the goalkeeper situation is going to cost us this season. I don't trust either of them. Obviously, very early days, but I still don't trust either of them to perform consistently. And I think it's probably going to cost us. Like you said, Jorgensen should have come off the line for the second goal. He got rounded too easily. I think after the game he actually said that, like, I should have, judged it better or whatever. But again, from everything I've heard about Jorgensen, he's a young player that needs to play to improve. He got better towards the latter end of last season at Villarreal because he played through the struggles and he played through his mistakes. Whereas at Chelsea, he's not going to be allowed to do that. Different types of pressure. We've just literally bought him because he's good on the ball. It's another recruitment decision where I'm like, okay, you're brain dead. What are you doing? You've bought 5 or 6 goalkeepers now, when if you accumulate that money together, you could have just got a Maignan or Diogo Costa and sorted the problem, for a few years. And it's just one of those where, Chelsea's just so, they like to be so edgy in the recruitment, they're just so edgy, they always have to be different.
Edgy is the right word, yeah.
Yeah, it's like with this Samu one, it's like, why him, like, why do you have to be so like out the box left field, like, oh, look at us, we're gonna get this guy, it's like, it's just weird, man. They're just obsessed with kids. That's all I can say. They're obsessed with kids.
But the thing is,
I mean, hey, one day, the full list of emails from that Epstein Island will come out, and I will not be surprised if Benedict Barley and a couple of others that are involved show up on that list. That's all I will say. But of course, allegedly, don't sue me, please, for the love of God. On Jorgensen, yeah. I don't know. Like, obviously, it was his second game, his first full game. So I'm not going to be like, say, okay, you're clearly not good enough after that. That would be silly. But do I think he looks much worse than Sanchez? No, I don't. But do I think Sanchez concedes these 2 goals? I actually think Sanchez might even stop the other one as well.
The first one for sure. The second one probably not.
I think the second one was
the Diaz goal.
Yeah. I think Sanchez would step out and pick up the ball.
Sanchez would be off his line. Sanchez might give a red card away and clatter him, but he would get to that ball before Diaz does. I think because Sanchez is so cocky and overconfident that he will be off his line that far. And the other one, I think, is just that, I don't know, a bit more explosive. So that's why I think when he tried to stop, because officially counted as Vazquez goal, even though I think it should have been Ceballos, I think Sanchez probably gets enough on that to get it out. But again, it's one game, so it's a bit difficult to judge. One thing, and there's another thing I wanted to bring up a minute ago when you talked about, you still kind of fancy Osimhen because you quite like Jackson out wide. Maresca obviously actually was asked about this post game, and he said, if we need Jackson as a winger some games, then so be it. But I view him as a striker, and before they specifically said position wise he views him as a striker. So as much as I might agree with you, even though obviously the winger is slightly different in this system than it was on a Poch last season. We haven't seen Jackson as a winger in this one. While I agree with you, if the manager doesn't that still make signing Osimhen potentially, if you've already signed Omorodion, a bit stupid?
Well, it's one of these things, isn't it? It's already, you're sensing that Maresca they're kind of giving players to Maresca that he might not necessarily want in a sense.
Shocking.
So, yeah, shocking. They only did that to Poch. They did that to Potter. They've done it every single time. So, I've always said the model is, we buy you the players, you work with them, you're expected to deliver results, and I'm sure he's consulted and he tells them profiles, but at the end of the day, I've always said this: if they really want a player, they don't care.
Oh yeah, they're getting the player. Yeah,
sure. So,
but
it's
I agree. But the one thing I say is they clearly don't want Osimhen that badly. Otherwise, they wouldn't only want him on the loan.
But they still clearly want him enough because they still kind of want him after you've signed someone. So it's like they're also sitting there in their offices,
they could have just not signed Wiley and have Mike Penders and Jurgensen
and all the other ones.
Or Petrovic, or this guy, or that guy, or Fofana, like Datro, or Washington, or any of these. And
or Wesley Fofana.
You could have easily, but that's so long ago. I even let them off for that. That was Todd Bowley still doing his thing, and at least he was signing high-profile players, not just mid. Do you know what I mean? Bring back Todd Bowley is what I say.
Well, we signed all of the high-profile players. That's why we're going for the lower ones now.
Yeah, exactly. We're no more high-profile players ever. But just interesting because of what you just spoke about, Pice, because I think you're 100% spot on that they don't care what the manager thinks. But I found it quite amusing that Maresca was in the press conference saying, I don't think there is any manager in the world not involved in decisions. I think transfer decisions, he means. How can I accept a player that doesn't fit into the idea I want to play? The squad is very good, but if there is a chance to do more, we will do it. So,
I am willing to bet my house.
Alone. Go on.
I'm willing to bet my house if we lose 3 games on the bounce, he starts speaking about how he doesn't have the players he wants. I can bet my house on that because every manager does that every time things go wrong. Anish did that last summer. Sarri did that because he spent the entire summer saying he doesn't need a striker. He needs the players to get there and he will coach them. And then he spent the entire December crying he doesn't have Higuain. So I can already bet my house. If really things go south, Maresca will be the first to try to say something about transfers, players, and not getting his systematic players' wishes or something like that.
Exactly. And this sentence that I now highlighted, obviously the whole quote, that to me tells me already Maresca will not be here for more than 2 years maximum. Because it didn't even take him a month of being here, or a bit more than a month, I guess, to start saying things like this. When it feels like Poch all over again. But in this case, I'm not even having that much of a go at the directors and the owners because they are clearly making it more than clear that they do not want the manager to speak up too much in the interview process. They clearly made that clear to Poch, and they clearly made that clear to Maresca. Maresca didn't last 6 weeks of not doing it or saying I am involved. And Poch, how long did he last? So I already find that a little bit worrying. And even though I wanted to let Pice and also the rest of us, go for half an hour already, now another thing Pice tweeted as we've been live, according to Gary Jacob, not surprising because Enzo has been wearing the armband at times in the season, but Enzo Maresca is expected to be appointed one of Chelsea's vice captains. I hate the whole word vice doesn't allow for there to be multiple. Otherwise, the whole word vice doesn't apply. But anyway, aside from that, thoughts? Pice, I would love to see an English test, and if he passes it, fine. If he doesn't, why is he vice captain? Because in Europe, only they haven't done it in the Prem yet, but in the Bundesliga and stuff, they're doing it. The whole at the Euros that only the captain is allowed to speak to the ref.
Yeah,
they're doing that in the Bundesliga. They're doing that in Austria. They're doing that in the Champions League, Conference League, Europa League. In the
Sorry for interrupting. But it's very funny when Harry Kane goes to the German ref and he doesn't speak German, so he just sits there and looks around next to Kimmich, who is talking to the ref. It's always so funny. No, he's not, but he instinctively goes to the ref, but he knows he can't talk to him, so he just sits there and just pretends to do something else. It's very funny, actually.
He probably just says, Weisswurst.
Yeah.
But I mean, Pice, where do you stand on Enzo being vice captain, especially if only the captain is allowed to speak to the ref and his English might not be great? We don't know what his English is like, though.
Yeah, I feel like Chelsea's captain and vice captains are more of like a PR thing within our club nowadays. Like,
Yeah.
I think we seriously lack leaders. Like for me, Thiago Silva's a captain. I don't think. I mean, I love Reece James, but I don't think he's a captain. I don't think we have a captain in our squad.
I think
Oh,
Colwill is
I
probably closest to it, but he's too
Yeah,
young
he's
for now.
probably, but he's still so young. So it's like for me, I don't know whether it's just me, but personal preference, I always associate a captain with someone a bit older, more experienced. So
Yeah. I mean, I guess John Terry became captain when he was young, but yeah.
yeah, but I see certain characteristics in certain players that could be captain, but at the end of the day, I don't know. I just think it's more of a PR thing with Chelsea nowadays. Take your
Yeah.
pick. Which one of the young ones do you want? You know what I mean? It's like I
The
don't
thing
know, man.
is, like 20 years ago, it doesn't matter who had the armband because you had Drogba, Lampard, Cech, Terry, and all of them could do the captain's work in every single situation. And now all of the people who we choose cannot. So basically, it still doesn't matter who's captain because all of them they can do the job, and it's amazing how things work out in the end.
Isn't it? Like, I do think in terms of like character-wise, and by that I don't mean songs. I mean character-wise on the pitch. Even yesterday, Enzo is the one driving the team. Enzo is the one that's shouting at others like, push, be aggressive, go there, do this, do that. So he is that guy that does it, to be fair, more than anybody else in the team that I can tell. So from that perspective, I respect it. But I mean, you brought up Thiago Silva there, Pies. The impact Thiago Silva has had on Fluminense is absolutely insane. They didn't win a single game before in this season because their season goes March to November. They didn't win a single game before he joined. Since he joined, won every game with him with a clean sheet. The one game he got rested, they lost again. I mean, like the impact is unbelievable. And I think they hadn't even kept a single clean sheet this season until he turned up. Since he's turned up, every game a clean sheet when he's played. Mental. It's mental. And then people said, Tosin was fine to replace.
Perfect replacement.
No problem. No problem. Tosin, 3 years Premier League experience. Amazing. Definitely comparable to Thiago Silva. Love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, to be honest though, as much as I mean, this thing, right? The song, I hope that this is not becomes a squad problem, because it's one thing allowing him back in the squad. It's another thing making him one of the captains.
Maybe he can teach the song to all of the squad.
Don't say that.
Can you imagine even the French player singing it? Now, that would be amazing squad unity. No, but I'm joking, of course, yeah.
Oh, man, yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know.
But
yeah, I don't know. Disasi is kind of captain material, but also Disasi is like Rudiger, where Disasi needs a captain rather than the.
No, Disasi, no.
Yeah, he's a character. He's a leader. He will push and stuff, but he shouldn't be the captain because sometimes he needs someone calming him down, not the other way around. So yeah, you see Madueke fight for the. That's funny. He fights for pens. He might fight for the armband on a touchline. So
yeah, whoever. Honestly, I'll decide it this way: whoever just goes and takes the ball off Madueke when he tries to be the captain. All right, let's just do that.
To be fair, there was Tosin last game.
My God. Yeah, no, I was giving credit, but then Enzo Maresca said he told him to, so I was like, okay, Tosin, I can't give you credit, So
yeah. So this is
who was that last year?
Oh,
Gallagher. Shit, he's not here anymore either.
Yeah.
Terrible. I think it's about time we wrap this up. There is Crystal Palace eye up Trevor Chalobah as potential replacement. We'll talk about it in more depth if and when this becomes a thing. Also, Maresca in a press conference speaking about it's not a Chelsea problem, the whole selling academies.
Oh yeah, come on.
And I'm like, bro, I feel bad for you that you've been dragged into this, but don't waffle. This is a Chelsea problem and nobody else's problem.
Yeah,
and the reason like is because we spend too much money on players that we don't need, and that's why
we can't say that though. Like, you'll get sacked straight away.
Yeah,
no, I agree. That's why I feel bad for him. It's not his fault, but like, just say no comment or something. Like, don't waffle.
Yeah, it's like our owners looked how the Arsenal owners treated Arsene Wenger in his last 5 years, basically using him as a PR puppet and having him say everything they do is good and that all the problems are elsewhere.
This explains so much now that I think about it. Maybe they're just copying Arsenal, because look how Arsenal treated Ozil. Terrible. Yeah. Look how Arsenal treated Aubameyang. Terrible. So like, now we just treat all of our players terrible as well because Arsenal do that. So
yeah, maybe Ekbali is good friends with Kroenke and he rings him up for advice once in a while.
Yeah, they've been to Epstein Island together, probably.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's about time we wrap this up. Pice told me he only has an hour, and I told him, Pice, tell me when you need to go. He still hasn't. So, Pice, I'm sorry. But, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, would be massively appreciated. Please do check out Pice on all his relevant channels, of course, on Twitter. CFC Pice, I'm sure you all follow him already, but if you don't, go over there. If he's blocked you, unlucky. I'm sure you did something to block. There you go. Of course, check out his playback streams, check out his website, londonsfirst.com. And Dimitar, he doesn't use the Twitter that much, but he's always linked down below. So if you want to follow him, do that as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. Hey, I'm going to try to be positive. So upwards and onwards, and we will see you next time.
Bye, guys.